Welcome to the What's New in Minitab 18 webinar. My name is Michelle Perret with Minitab, and I'll be your presenter for today. Before we get started, I have two housekeeping items to cover with you. The first being the audio delay. Because we are broadcasting the audio through your computer speakers, you may notice just a slight delay with the audio. If that becomes problematic for you, please make a note of the phone numbers at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any audio issues, you can alternatively dial into one of those phone numbers. The second housekeeping item is with regard to your questions. If you have any questions at all, please go ahead and type them into the chat, and then at the end of the webinar, we will have time for Q&A. So our agenda for today is we are going to start with just a brief introduction to the Minitab user interface. I know that some of you in the audience are brand new to Minitab, while most of you are here, of course, to learn about the new features. So we're going to start off with just a quick introduction to Minitab. Then we are going to move on to the new features in Minitab 18 related to the user interface. And then last, we're going to cover the new statistical features in the software. So that is our agenda for today. And with that, let's go ahead and open up Minitab and start taking a look at the new version. All right, so for those of you that aren't familiar with Minitab really at all, when you first open Minitab, you're going to see that big white box at the top called the session window, and this is where your stats are going to appear. And then below the session window, you can see what, of course, is where your data is going to go. And in Minitab, the spreadsheets, we refer to them as worksheets. So one of the common questions we get is, what are the size limitations of the worksheets? And in Minitab 18, you can have up to 4,000 columns, while the number of rows is limited by the available RAM of your computer. And you can have multiple worksheets in a Minitab project, which is just like you can have multiple sheets in Excel. So you have the session window at the top. You have your worksheet at the bottom. And then at the top, you'll notice a series of menus. So the File menu, of course, is the menu that you're going to use to open up files, whether they be Minitab files or Excel files, or you want to import data from a database perhaps. That's all available from the File menu. And then there's other menus like data manipulation and calculator functions. But the menus that you're going to use the most often in Minitab are the stat menus, or the stat menu, which of course is where the stats are, and the graph menu, which is where most of the graphs are. There are also some graphs available in the stat menu. So for example, if you're a big fan of Pareto charts, that would be an example of a graph that's instead located under the stat menu. But the stat and graph menus are where you're going to spend most of your time in Minitab once your data is ready for analysis. The other menu that is very popular is the assistant menu. The assistant menu has the most popular stat and graph tools, but this offers you a more guided experience. So if you need help choosing the right tool, or you need help interpreting the statistical results, then the assistant menu is going to be your best friend. Even if you're statistically savvy, if you have to present your results to people who aren't so statistically savvy, the assistant might also be a big help to you. So the assistant menu helps you find the right tool, and it provides these comprehensive, easy to understand reports of all of your results. So the stat menu, the graph menu, and the assistant menu, this is where the graphical and statistical features in Minitab reside. All right, So that was a crash course on the Minitab user interface. But the purpose of today's webinar is to talk about the new features in 18. So let's move on to those. So for those of you who have been using Minitab for a while, different older versions of Minitab, one of the things that you might notice is that when you first open the software, there aren't big changes to the user interface. We try to keep the user interface changes to a minimum, so it's easy for you to transition from one release to the next, both in finding it just as easy to use, and also for those of you that have training materials, we know that people don't love and spending a lot of time on updating their training materials. So on the surface, Minitab 18 is going to look very similar to previous versions. But one of the first places where we made some nice changes is to the session window when you're running various stats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just open up an Excel file. We are going to start with data on the Titanic because pretty much everyone knows the story of the Titanic. So it's easy data to understand and take a look at. All right, so here we have data from the Titanic. It's every passenger in first, second, and third class, how old they were, what class they were in, first, second, or third, what gender they were, so on and so forth. Okay, so we have data on all the passengers. And let's suppose we want to start just by running some basic stats. Let's suppose we want to look at what is the average age of the passengers for first class versus second class versus third class. Let's say we want to take a look at that. So we will go to the Display Descriptive Statistics menu, and we'll go ahead and look at the age variable, and by the different classes, we can go under Statistics, choose the statistics we want. So none of this is new. You've been able to do this forever in Minitab. Maybe we want to go create some graphs as well. Maybe we want a histogram and a box plot. All right, so here we have the session window. So one of the first things that you might notice if you've been using Minitab for a while is we've taken the output out of the 80s. We're now in the 2000s. A lot of people, have said that the session window previously looked a little outdated, so we gave it a new and improved look. But not only does the session window look better, it also offers you a lot of nice new features. So it doesn't just look better, it performs better as well. So one of the things that we did in the new session window based on customer request is you now have the ability to zoom in the session window. So if I hold down the control key and use my mouse wheel, I can now zoom in or out of the session window. So if you're presenting, like I'm presenting to you right now, this is really nice because it makes it easier for your audience to see your results. Or if you forgot your glasses at work, you can easily use the zoom feature. And there's other ways to zoom. You can, for example, go to the editor menu and zoom that way as well. So as with most things in Minitab, there's more than one way to do it. There's also this menu here that allows you to zoom in or out as well. But I'm a big fan of holding down the control button on my keyboard and using the wheel on my mouse, which is also a trick you can use in the Minitab worksheets as well. So zooming is something new that we added to Minitab 18. One of the most popular customer requests that we have ever received is a lot of you have been asking us for the ability to change the number of significant digits in the output. So you now can do that in Minitab 18. So for example, if I need more than 3 decimal places for the mean for my first, second, and third class passengers, I can now go to that column, right-click on it, and I now can tell Minitab how many decimal places I want. So, for example, if you're creating regression models or you're using the general linear model functionality in Minitab, a lot of you have been saying, I need more precision for my coefficients, for my regression models. So that's another example of where you may want to increase the number of decimal places in your results. So just go to the column that you want to manipulate, right-click on it, and you can now change the number of decimals. Okay? Another thing that we added, which is really nice, is you can now easily access your graphs via links. You've actually been able to do this for quite a while in Minitab, but you had to right-click and know which option to choose, and customers could never find it or rarely find it. So now it's very obvious and easy to get to your graph. All you have to do is hover over the link, click on it, and now you can get to your graph. You can still navigate through your projects using these project manager buttons, but you can also now easily click on these links to jump to your graphs as well. All right, so you can zoom, you can increase the number of decimal places, you now have links to your graphs, and the next thing that I wanted to point out to you, let's suppose we run a bunch of analyses. In fact, let me just run a logistic regression about whether or not someone survives. All right, we're not going to make this too complicated here. But the point is, let's suppose you run a bunch of analyses. You can now expand and collapse whatever parts of the output you want, just to make it a little easier for you to scan through all of your results and also focus on the results that are most pertinent to what you're doing. So if you imagine we've run a whole bunch of analyses, you can now expand or collapse, whichever pieces of the output that you want. The last thing that I wanted to point out before we move on is I wanted to talk about Stack Guide. A lot of customers have been calling and they've said to us, what did you do to Stack Guide? If you're not familiar with Stack Guide is a really helpful feature that it's basically help information on how you interpret your results. So if you're looking at these descriptive stats, or maybe you're looking at binary logistic regression and you're saying to yourself, I have no idea what any of this means, that's when Stack Guide is super helpful. So Stack Guide's been available for years, and a lot of customers who've upgraded to 18 have said, where'd Stack Guide go? So the icon and the name have changed, but the information is the same. If you, I'm sorry, I'm hovering over the wrong thing. You now want to go to the question mark, which is just simply called help. So whether you're someone who's used to accessing Stack Guide from the session window, you can now do that here. And it's now online. So here is my Stack Guide information, even though it's simply called help. So if you're a person that's used to accessing Stack Guide from the session window, you can do that using this option. Or if you create graphs, you can also access that Stack Guide type information by right-clicking and going to help. So the point is it's now called help instead of Stack Guide, but it's the same similar information that you're used to, which walks you through how to interpret the output. So if you're a big fan of Stat Guide, the information's still available. You just now go to Help instead of that purple Stat Guide icon. And one more thing that's really nice about Minitab 18, in older versions of Minitab, let me run the same analysis in Minitab 17. So I'm in Minitab 17, and I'm going to do my basic stats. I think I'm doing the same stats here. It doesn't really matter. You'll understand what I'm trying to show you. All right, so in older versions of Minitab, let's say I needed to put this in Word or Excel. You copy and paste it. You go over to Excel, and when you paste it in, what happens? In older versions of Minitab, this would paste over, whether you're in Excel or in Word, as one big chunk of output. It's all in one column. So if I want to get rid of, say, the standard deviation column, or I want to highlight the column of means, it was super painful to move it across into different columns. But now in Minitab 18, let me get rid of this, or I'll just go to a new sheet, that's fine. Now in Minitab 18, if I copy this output and I go into Excel and I paste it in, it now pastes as a nice, neat table. So if I want to get rid of the standard deviation column, if I want to highlight these means, I can now easily take advantage of all of that formatting and functionality within Excel. So just to make sure we covered everything, in the updated session window, it not only looks better, you can change significant digits, you can access the graphs easily with the links, you can expand and collapse, you can zoom in or out, and I should also add a bullet there that it's easier to export into Excel or into Word using true table format. Okay? All right, the next feature that we're going to talk about, we already talked about Stat Guide. The next feature that we're going to talk about is the ability to sort worksheets. So in older versions of Minitab, you could always sort your graphs. So imagine I had, say, 20 graphs that I created, and I wanted to organize them in a certain way. I could easily rename them, and then I could say, all right, I want to sort by worksheet, or I want to sort by title. Customers have been telling us, you know, it's really great you can do that for the graphs, but I want to organize my worksheets too. Maybe you have one master worksheet that you always want to appear at the top. So now in Minitab 18, you can now order these by title as well. So if you have 10 or less worksheets, the trick is you can use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or if you have more than 10 worksheets, then I suggest using the alphabet. That's the trick that I use. So if I want this one to appear first, I'll call this A. If I want this one to appear second, I'll start this one off with the letter B, so on and so forth. So you can use numbers or you can use the alphabet to easily sort and manage your worksheets. All right, so that covers the main features, that user interface features that we added to Minitab 18. What we're now going to move on to is the new statistical features that we added to the software. And we are going to start with the features that we added to Design of Experiments. So if you're someone who uses DOE, this is where you need to find out what X's are important with respect to one or more Y's, and you're going to create a basically a data collection plan using DOE, and then you're going to then analyze, find out which X's are important, and how to, what settings you can use to optimize a Y. So if you're a fan of DOE, I want to talk about the new screening menu that we added. So in older versions of Minitab, we had Plackett-Berman designs for screening. So what are screening designs? This is where you have a lot of X's and you're not sure where to begin. You have all these X's that could be impacting your Y, and you need to start to whittle down those X's to the important few, to the vital few. So screening designs are appropriate for when you have lots of X's. Usually once you hit 7 X's, maybe in certain industries fewer, but let's say you have 10 X's for a DOE. Well, that's typically too expensive to accomplish with, say, a 2-level design. So in that case, you're going to use a screening design. So in older versions of Minitab, the only type of screening design we had was Plackett-Berman. But in the last couple of years, there's a new type of screening design that's come about called definitive screening designs. And definitive screening designs are better than Plackett-Berman designs in that you can more easily evaluate your interactions. There isn't as much confounding as in Plackett-Berman designs. And another beautiful thing about definitive screening designs is they also allow you to include quadratic terms. And these are limitations that exist in Plackett-Berman. So based on customer demands, we now have a new type of screening design, and it's available in the new Stat DOE screening menu. So if we go to Create Screening Design or Define, you'll now see the option for Plackett-Berman, just like we always had, but now you also see the option for Definitive Screening Design. If you are familiar with Minitab's DOE functionality, it's going to be very easy for you to figure out how to use the new menus and features. The definitive screening design menus work just like all the other DOE menus. First, you want to create your design. Maybe we have 10 X's. Tell Minitab if you have reps or blocks. Then you want to go under factors, name these factors. Maybe one's time, one's temperature. Maybe you have 2 different types of catalysts. Time 10 and 30, temp 125 and 175, catalysts, maybe you'll just call them type A and type B, so on and so forth. So just like any other DOE menu in Minitab, you type in the information for your X's, you create your design, and then you go ahead and you collect your data on whatever your Y variable is, and you type it in. So here I have a definitive screen design where here we have our 7 X's, and here in column C12 we have our Y. And then if we want to go ahead and analyze this design, just like any other DOE menu, you want to go to Analyze. If you want to use stepwise or stepwise, you can use that feature to find out what the critical X's are, specify your alpha level. And here we can see for this 7-factor DOE, we can see which of the variables were significant, and then from there we can go ahead and predict for given settings, plot the data, optimize, etc. Okay? So if you're one of the people who's been asking for DSD, I'm happy to tell you that we added it to Minitab 18. Just some other things that we added to DOE. People typically love these Pareto charts for DOE because especially if you have to present this to, say, your boss who's not a statistician or very statistically savvy, this is a really easy visual to communicate which X's were important. Here we can clearly see which X's cross the red line, and it's really easy to communicate your results. Much easier than, say, showing someone who may not enjoy statistics something like this. Okay? This is a little scary if you're not, you don't know much about stats. So Pareto charts for DOE, very easy to communicate which X's are important. So a lot of you have been saying, I love the Pareto chart of effects. However, you didn't previously have it for general factorial designs. And by the way, Minitab, you also didn't have it for response surface design. So another nice thing we added in Minitab 18 is you can now create this easy to understand Pareto chart for both general factorial and response surface design. Okay? All right. The next new feature we're going to talk about relates to tolerance intervals. So Minitab 17 had tolerance intervals, but only for data that followed a normal distribution. If you're saying to yourself, I don't even know what a tolerance interval is, the best definition I ever heard for tolerance intervals, I'm having a hard time saying that today, is tolerance intervals, it's what you thought confidence intervals were before you learned the true definition of a confidence interval. So what I'm trying to say there is tolerance intervals allow you to capture a certain percentage of the population. So let's say we work for a light bulb or a lamp company, and we are looking at how many hours these light bulbs last until they burn out. You know, how many hours are these light bulbs going to last? So we collect data on a whole bunch of light bulbs, and we want to say 90% of our light bulbs last between this number of hours and that number of hours. That's what a tolerance interval is. It gives you an interval that captures a certain percentage of the population. So let's suppose we have data. This isn't for light bulbs. This is some type of critical measurement on, I believe, ceramic tiles, or some type of tile. I don't know if it's ceramic tiles. Okay, so let's say we collect a bunch of data. You know, maybe it's how long light bulbs last. Maybe it's how long loans take to process. Maybe it's some critical dimension of some part that's manufactured. We take a whole bunch of measurements, collect all, you know, let's say in this case we collect 100 different samples, and we measure each of those 100 parts, and we record the data here. So in older versions of Minitab, all you could do was calculate a tolerance interval using a normal distribution. Let's say we want to capture 90% of the population. So here we have our tolerance interval for 100 data points. But if we look at this normal probability plot, it's clear that this data does not follow a normal distribution. And the histogram at the top shows us that it's skewed to the right. So that therefore tells us that this tolerance interval here is not a good estimate of what's going on with these samples. Okay? And Minitab does offer a non-parametric alternative But in this case, our confidence is good. But in a lot of cases, the achieved confidence, especially if you don't have a lot of data, it's going to be small. So yes, it's going to give you an interval based on a non-parametric calculation, but a lot of times it's not going to give you as high of a confidence level as you need. So instead, a better statistical approach is to find out, well, if this data doesn't follow a normal distribution, what distribution should we use instead? So if we use individual distribution identification, which has been available in Minitab for quite a long time, you can, pick whatever distributions you want here, whatever you want to pick. Here we can see that the data doesn't follow a normal distribution, which we already knew. Exponential is no good. Log logistic is no good. But here if we look at Weibull, this seems to be a pretty good fit. So let's suppose we want to calculate a tolerance interval using a Weibull distribution. In older versions of Minitab, this would not have been an option for you. But now in Minitab 18, you can use the new option for non-normal distribution, and you can tell Minitab which distribution you want to use. Again, specify whatever percentage you want. And now we can say with 95% confidence that 90% of all of the parts in the population will have measurements somewhere between 0.385 and 7.315. And then just a little trick, I like to add those tolerance interval lines to the graph itself. So if that's something you want to do, you can use the reference line option and type in these values. And now I can easily communicate that with 95% confidence, we can estimate that 90% of all of these parts in the entire population, whether they be light bulbs, tiles, or loans, whatever they are, will fall somewhere between 0.385 and 7.315. So non-normal tolerance intervals is another new feature that we added to Minitab 18. The next thing that I want to talk about is the new functionality that we added to GLM, or really just to ANOVA in general. So for those of you that use ANOVA, one of the things that we added is we added a brand new feature called Mixed Effects Model. And just like I said earlier for DOE, if you know how to use the other ANOVA or even regression tools in Minitab, it will be easy for you to figure out how to use this new feature. So this new feature is for those of you who've been asking for REML. So if you've been asking for the REML estimation method for models where you have both fixed x's and random x's, this new feature is for you. Also, for example, if you have fixed x's and random x's and you want to calculate predictions, that's another new feature that Mixed Effects Models offers. So for those of you who've been asking for REML, you can now find it under the Mixed Effects Model feature that we added to Minitab 18. One other thing related to GLM, let me just pull up the Titanic data. This example isn't going to necessarily make too much sense, but it doesn't much matter. All right, so let's suppose for some crazy reason we want to predict, let's say, well, let me pull up a different data set. Here we go. Let's do this instead. let's pretend for some reason, let's suppose we have some numeric measurement. We have some categorical x. So we have two x's, one's numeric, one's categorical, and let's suppose we have a numeric continuous y. So in older versions of Minitab, if I wanted to predict for my y using a categorical, one or more categorical x's, and then one or more continuous y's, so we see here we have a continuous x that we included in GLM, and in older versions of Minitab, if you wanted to use the response optimizer, you could only optimize on the categorical x's. You could not optimize on the continuous x's, also known as covariates. So again, we take your feedback very seriously. So based on a lot of customer requests, in the GLM response optimizer, you can now optimize not only on your categorical x's, you can now also optimize on your continuous x's. So this, for example, is telling us that the optimal setting for this, let's say, continuous x, is we want to set that x variable at the number 1. So in the ANOVA menu, we added mixed effects model, which offers REML, and under GLM, you can now include not only your categorical x's, you can also include your continuous x's as well. For those of you who are big fans of using Minitab command language, you can program in Minitab if you don't want to use the point-and-click menus. For those of you who like to program, I should mention that under, you can no longer run commands within the session window itself. So instead, you now want to use the new feature called Show Command Line, and this is how you can run commands in Minitab. So if you're someone who likes to use command language instead of point and click, I just wanted to mention to you that you now want to go to the session window, and under the editor menu, you now want to go to Show Command Line to get to this command line pane. One more thing about this session window. I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth here, so I apologize. I also wanted to mention that the session window is no longer editable. For those of you that are in organizations regulated by the FDA, for example in pharmaceuticals, a lot of you who are regulated by organizations such as the FDA, you've been requesting the ability to lock down the session window, per FDA regulations and guidelines. So the session window is now locked down. It's no longer editable. So I just wanted to mention that for those of you who've been asking for that as well. All right, the last thing that I want to show you before we move on to the Q&A is in the Gauge R&R features, in older versions of Minitab, you have the option to specify a historical standard deviation. But in older versions of Minitab, this is what your output looks like. You would get your percent study var column, but the only place where the historical standard deviation would be incorporated is in the calculations for percent process. But a lot of you are calling up tech support and telling us, if I provide a historical standard deviation, I want Minitab to use the historical standard deviation in the calculations. I don't, for example, want to see percent study there based on the parts. I want you to use the historical standard deviation that I specify, as well as for other stats such as number of distinct categories. So now in Minitab, by default, if you specify a historical standard deviation, that historical standard deviation is now going to be incorporated in all of the relevant calculations, including percent study and number of distinct categories as well. All right. So we talked about definitive screening designs. We talked about tolerance intervals for non-normal distribution. And then we talked about the various other features that we added in other areas of the software as well. One last thing that we added relates to licensing. If your company has a multi-user license and you need to use Minitab on your, let's say you have your laptop at work and you're going to be traveling, or maybe you even need to use Minitab, just while you're at home. In Minitab 18, it's now much easier for you to borrow a license from your network. So if you're in your office and you have a multi-user license, you can now go to the Help menu and go to About Minitab, and you will now see this link that allows you to easily borrow a license from the network, which means when you then take your laptop home with you or on the road and you open up Minitab, you'll be able to access the software. So you've been able to borrow licenses for multi-user license types for years and years and years, but it wasn't easily accessible. So now all you have to do, go to Help, About Minitab, click the Borrow License link, and you'll be able to say, I want to borrow this license for 1 day, 1 week, 1 year, whatever it is. And again, that's just for people who have a multi-user license, which is the most common and popular type of license that people have. All right, if you don't yet have Minitab 18, you can easily download a free 30-day trial from minitab.com/product/minitab. If you want to purchase a single user license, you can go to store.minitab.com. Or if you have a multi-user license, that means you get upgrades for free. And if you don't know who your license coordinator is at your organization, you can contact us and we'll be able to direct you to the right person. So you can get Minitab for free with a 30-day trial. You can buy single-user licenses on our store, or multi-user license holders get the latest version for free. So with that, it is time for your questions. So if you haven't yet typed in your question, please go ahead and do so now. All right, so the first question, I learned that Pareto charts are not possible for, say, response surface designs because its calculations are based on F statistics, not T statistics. Did the calculations behind change? No, the calculations did not change. All it's doing is just calculating that critical value and then using, the same stats and p-values as before. So the calculations for response surface have not changed. There's just a new visual way to display your p-values. Next question, is borrowing licenses free? Yes. So if you have a multi-user license, you can borrow a license from the network for free. When you initially get your multi-user license, You have to pay for the license pool up front, but once you've paid for that license pool, you can borrow them free of charge. All right, next question, are there any improvements to parametric distribution analysis? The only thing we did there was, I think if you're using least squares, we changed some of the options for displaying confidence intervals, but that's the only impact there. If there's something you would like to see new in parametric distribution analysis, definitely let us know that. You know, we're always happy to hear new customer requests and incorporate them into the software. Next question, how do we return the license when finished before expiry of the borrowing period? If you want to return a license to the server, all you have to do is go back to Help About Minitab and you'll have an option to return it. So it's very easy to both borrow and return the license as well. Next question, please tell me more regarding the locking of the session window feature. So basically you can no longer edit the session window. So in older versions of Minitab, I literally could have gone to a p-value and changed that p-value to whatever number I wanted. But now the session window is locked down. So you can still, let me zoom back out here. You can still, for example, you know, delete parts of your session window output if you want to. That hasn't been taken away. If you want to add notes, you can do that as well. So you can still, you know, type text in the session window. You just can no longer edit things like means and p-values. Next question, is there any plan to add center points for curvature in split plot DOE designs? So we didn't touch split plot for Minitab 18. So if you go to that feature, this is still the options that you have available. However, I'll definitely pass that feedback along for consideration in a future release. Oh, next question. This is a good one. I'm glad someone asked this. Would Minitab 17 be able to open Minitab 18 files? That is a great question. If you have older projects, you can easily open those in Minitab 18. So if you have a Minitab 16 or a Minitab 17, all you have to do is go to File, Open, and you can easily open that older project in Minitab 18. However, if you have Minitab 18 and you need to send your work, your project, to someone with an older version, there's an extra step. If I want to save this project to someone with, say, Minitab 17, I have to go to File, Save Project As, and then I have to save it in that older format. Now the caveat is the new session window in 18 uses new upgraded technology that's not available in 17. So your session window in 18 will not be compatible with 17. So what you instead need to do is, if I want to save this project with someone who has 17, you want to first send this output to the report pad, whatever you think might be relevant. And then, so now if I go to the report pad, I see all of my session output. Then, so you want to save your 18 results, save it to the report pad, and then go to File, Save Project As, and save it in 17 format. Okay? So you can save the 18 files in older versions but you want to move your session output over to the report pad so they'll be able to see it, because their session window in, say, 17, doesn't have the latest technology. Let's see. Next question. Will there be any changes to the reliability modules? Again, the only changes there are, I think if you're using least square estimations, there are some changes to some of the confidence interval options, but that's it. Next question, are there any ways to insert comments in the lockdown session? So maybe that question came in before I showed the notes, but just in case, if you want to add any comments, just use this note feature and you can type whatever information you want in there. Next question, are there any plans for a Mac version of Minitab? So I use Minitab on my Mac using Parallels, or you can use any other type of desktop virtualization software, including Apple Boot Camp. So currently the only native Mac version we have is an academic version, but it's very trimmed down, so it probably wouldn't satisfy the needs of most commercial customers. So for commercial customers in industry, if you want to run Minitab on your Mac, I suggest using Parallels, Apple Boot Camp, or something of the like, and it should work just fine. Next question, what is the advantage of definitive screen designs? The main advantages there is that you don't have the issues with main effects being confounded with two-way interactions, and also you also can include quadratic terms if there's curvature. So that's the primary advantage of definitive screen designs over Placket Berman. Also, let me scroll down here. At the bottom of your screen, there's lots of information on Minitab.com about definitive screen designs. So if you go to Minitab.com, you can search for definitive screen designs. But I also recommend this JQT article that you see at the bottom of your screen. So if you want more information on DSDs, definitely check out Minitab Help. And then also here's a JQT article if you're interested in that as well. Next question, can mixed effects models be applied to regression as well as ANOVA? So the regression and ANOVA features in Minitab are very similar. And if you use mixed effects model, you'll see the option to include covariates as well. So if you have fixed X's, random X's, continuous X's, you can use the mixed effects models feature to accommodate all those different types of variables. All right, just a couple more questions. Next one, can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes. All of you should receive a thank you email within the next 24 hours that includes a link to the slides as well as a recording. And last, if I have a system that collects big data from a continuous production line, may I import this data on a real-time basis, and is there a limitation on the data size? So customers use all different types of ways to import data into Minitab. Minitab has an entire macro scripting language that people use to automate their analyses. Minitab's also COM-enabled, so if you want to use Visual Basic and other techniques to integrate Minitab into your systems, you can do that as well. In fact, there's information on blog.minitab.com on that, which I can send you directly. last question that we'll answer, can I see the half normal plot for definitive screening design? So let's take a look at that. If we go to Analyze the Screening Design, under Graphs, you'll see the option for both normal and the half normal plot as well. And here's what that looks like. All right, well, I think I got to everyone's questions, but if you think of anything later, please don't hesitate to go to minitab.com/contact us and look up the phone number for your local Minitab office. I really appreciate everyone taking a time out of your day to join me, and I hope this was informative and useful. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.